Vacation. I think we're good.
Sorry, I do that every time. I see it over here now, but then on the actual Facebook, it still gives me an error. So sorry about that. But welcome to Living in the Texas Hill Country. Um, I'm Carly Howell, Ag and Natural Resources County Extension Agent for Blanco County, and Liz is with us again today. And we also have a special guest, Dr. Swiger. Dr. Swiger, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so Sonia Swiger, I'm an entomologist with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension that specializes in livestock and medical pests.
So yeah, so Dr. Swiger is going to talk to us today about the New World Screwworm, which some of y'all may have heard about. Some of y'all, this may be completely new to you, but this is something that has been circulating. I don't think I've seen it on too many major news stations, though. I think Dr. Swiger would have a different opinion of that. So Dr. Swiger, before we hopped on, she was saying you had like in the past 2 months, like 430 something like media requests over the past 2 months, which is a lot.
Yeah, media posts, which some of them I do personally, but then others they grab. But it is an extreme amount, that's for sure.
So this is like I said, this is a very hot topic that is coming down the line. This is something that hopefully we will not have to deal with. But we figured if this does arrive here that we should inform y'all of what it is and give you a little bit of background. So I guess Dr. Swiger, I guess kind of give us a little bit of, I guess we'll start with what is the New World Screwworm?
Yeah. So the New World Screwworm is actually a blowfly species. And when you think of blowflies, you generally don't think of them as being too big of a problem. They're actually a group of flies that lay their eggs in dead animals or decomposing matter that most things do not want to inhabit. So they actually do a process that's really good. They break down this material that would not break down fast in the same capacity without their assistance, so to speak, because the larva will feed on that material. But the big difference here is the New World Screwworm, like the Old World Screwworm, which is the name that people always get hung up on, prefer to lay their eggs on a living animal with a fresh wound. So nothing dead about the wound, very brand new. And then those larvae will feed on that wound, which is, of course, extremely problematic because you have a living animal and humans too, that now you have live fly larvae consuming that animal while it is still living, and it turns into a terrible process. So.
Yeah, that I really hope it doesn't get here because that just, oh my gosh, it just gives me the heebie-jeebies just sitting here and thinking about it. But I guess okay, so New World Screwworm lays their eggs in living tissue versus the other ones dead tissue.
Right.
So oh gosh, I had a transition in my brain of we're gonna talk about so this is not necessarily a quote unquote like new problem that we've had here. They were actually here before. Some of y'all may have seen it. It was back in was it the 50s?
Well, anytime before the 70s. So yes,
70s,
so
okay.
it isn't, the name is what people get hung up on. We call it New World, but that doesn't mean it's a new pest. It's just because the Americas are the New World,
New World.
and the Old World is, as they say, across the pond, right? Over the water in back in Europe and Africa. So that name can get people hung up, but no, we did have it here. It originates from the Americas, and it actually can live and survive in all of our southern states. And it did back before the 70s, because we dated back to basically when the conquistadors showed up. So a long time ago. We don't know exactly because it was here before we were. But it is extremely problematic, and we did go through a great deal of effort to get rid of it because we knew the impact was just so severe at the time. And I'm sure the introduction of cattle to the Americas also added to that, because prior to that point, they would have just lived on wildlife in that situation.
So I guess so they were here, and actually there was was it 2016 they made a resurgence in Florida for the
Yeah, there was
key deer.
an outbreak. Yes, there was an outbreak, which they've yet to really figure out how. But the screwworms, it is found, like I said, naturally in the Americas, which included North America, Central America, and South America, and it's in the Caribbean. And it still survives in the Caribbean islands and in South America prior to this last couple of weeks or years where we've had this outbreak. Because of our eradication efforts, we're all directed to North America, into Mexico, down through Central America. But there was an outbreak in 2016 on one of the keys in which the key deer were attacked, unfortunately. And these are a small subspecies of white-tailed deer that are what I hear kind of like little dogs because they're not very big and they really
They're
like
very,
people.
you think South Texas deer are tiny and dainty. Key deer are even more so.
Yeah, I'm sure. I've heard. I'm sure they're smaller than my Great Dane, which is probably sad for a wild animal. So, but and then unfortunately they were attacked, and those flies came in during the springtime. They started in March of 2016 and attacked the males during rutting season and destroyed about 85% of that population. By the time it was understood what they were dealing with, it was reported, and then they started to manage that situation. It took almost a full year. It took 8 years of maintenance to re-establish the eradication in that one key, and it was a major impact. So.
All right. So I guess so we've talked about a little bit of the history that it's not anything new here to the US.
Right.
It's been pretty well eradicated for the past 50 years. Your dog's trying to make an appearance.
I know. I'm trying to get him out, but he won't.
That's okay. We always we love, you know, it's one of those things. It's one of the things about fun about hi buddy. Oh, sorry. It's what's his name?
Trig. So, yeah.
Oh,
Gosh, mine's name is Trigger, like because he was supposed to be a hunting dog, but he's not.
Trig, but yeah.
And he looks kind of like yours. It's cute.
oh, sorry, dog distracted me. So
Yeah.
sorry. Not a bad distraction, not a bad distraction at all. So, you know, we've had it here. It's been gone for roughly 50 years, but recently basically within the past, was it year? I believe it was end of 2024 is when it sort of became an issue again.
Yes, so they are reporting the current outbreak to may have started at the end of 2022, but definitely 2023 in Panama. And that's where we had eradicated it to. So the process of eradication was with the use of sterile flies, which we mass rear them and then deposit them in the wild so that they mate with the females, the wild females, and eventually crash the population because they cannot reproduce. They don't lay viable offspring. So with those efforts, we completely moved it out of the US and out of Mexico down into Panama to the Darien Gap. And then this current outbreak started, as I said, like late 2022, and then 2023, they started to see more cases getting east of the Darien Gap, which is where, or I'm sorry, west of the Darien Gap, which is not allowed. It's allowed on the east side because that's South America. But because we never eradicated the species from the earth, which would be wonderful, but really, really hard, yes, it started moving. And since then, it has moved through all of the Central American countries and into Mexico, which it showed up in Mexico in November of 2024. So that's when I would say the US really started to take notice, not saying folks weren't watching before them, but it really started to get to be more impactful because now it's closer. And the closer it gets to us, the more concerning, and the more area that it encompasses is more concerning because that allows for more opportunities for it to come back. Not that it was ever not a possibility, it's just that when we keep it in certain areas like South America and the Caribbean, when we only have to kind of watch things coming from those areas instead of places like Mexico and Central America, where we have a lot of cattle movement from.
Right. Well, and also, and you touch on this is, you know, that Darien Gap is, I mean, on a map, it looks teeny, teeny, tiny. Like it is like like a little sliver. Yeah. So you go from, you know, that amount of square miles to all of a sudden, you know, Mexico, you know, you get out of Central America and it opens up. So trying to cover that amount of area, get the sterile flies across, becomes way more challenging and a little bit more complicated.
Yes. And that was one of the reasons they chose that area when we had all those countries involved in wanting to be a part of the program, because of course that all took work over the 40 plus years it took to eradicate it. But it was also a target point with small geographical range, because this fly cannot travel over water, large bodies of water. So we had that barrier on the northern and the southern side of it. And yeah, and that was the main focus. So yeah, going back to Mexico really is concerning because Mexico is massive and you have all these areas that it could potentially survive in.
Carly, sorry, I'm just taking over. Carly, do you have any questions?
No, you're good. You're flowing really well. So,
So sorry.
no, you're
So
fine.
so obviously, it has started to move a little bit more northward over the past couple of almost the past year, basically. And obviously the US has become very hyper aware that this is a potential future problem for us, due to the fact that, livestock get moved, people move, which you had touched on this. Apparently, we'll kind of shut this one down, I guess. Is that apparently in the news yesterday there was a human that came into the US that had it, but that is under control.
Yes, yes, that individual, which I only know a little of what's been reported, apparently showed up at some sort of a healthcare facility, let's say a hospital, for the incident, and it has been treated and managed. And human cases generally are. They're not on our high risk of concern because they're very low in numbers anyways. And again, most people are not going to allow the larva to consume them to a point that they're incapacitated, right? Because it's not a pleasant experience. So they generally seek medical attention is where I'm going with that. So we generally realize that they're dealing with it. Now, animals, completely different situation because they can't tell us. In the sense of speaking, they can tell us in some ways, but from what I hear, when they do have these larval infestations, they tend to not want to really be around people or around other animals. And of course, this is anecdotal because I was not here back in the 70s when they had it. But the farmers will tell you that those cows will go hide. And that's problematic. So you have to really know where your animals are at all times and keep head counts, because it's that one missing cow that's going to be the problem, not the one running up to get the feed every time, because it really impacts the way they feel, because again, they're being eaten from the inside.
Yeah. And I guess touching on that, we should talk about what animals or what groups of animals are generally affected by the screwworm, as well as what are some of the signs that an animal has an infection.
Yeah. So generally speaking, all animals are potential hosts. So the fly doesn't really have like, I must use this animal choice, right? It's not a host preference. I think it's probably more like this is host ability is where it is. It's who I see first. It's who I'm getting a hold of. And as we all know, livestock are generally in large numbers. It's not, you don't normally have like just a few like you do with dogs. Most people only have a handful of dogs or less. But they'll have 100 plus cattle. So that's generally, I think, why we see that big difference in numbers. But it's any warm-blooded animal of any type. And that includes them all livestock, cattle, horses, bison, sheep, goat, pigs, dogs, cats, raccoons, everything, and humans and birds. But birds are rare, but they're not impossible. I think it depends on the situation, probably the size of the bird as well. But in Central America right now, the largest groups being hit are cattle and dogs. Those are the top two. And I would suspect as well we would see large number in deer, for sure, which Central America is not doing a great, at least I've heard they're not having the ability to check the wildlife. I think it's just lack of resources, right? Folks that can go check them, plus they're wild animals. They're hard to find. But we know that is a huge area of concern for Texas. And based on the numbers we had prior to the eradication of the fly to now, we know that they were impacting their population severely. So that would return, unfortunately. So big concerns for that.
Yeah. So then what does it look like if an animal does have an infestation?
Yes. So what I hear, and again,
the really juicy, lovely stuff.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to take the time in Google, you can look up the pictures. They are disgusting. I will say, even as a person who did research in forensics and looked at lots of maggots eating a dead animal, eating a live animal is a totally different situation,
Totally
and
different ballgame.
it's totally nasty. But you'll see these full-grown larvae just consuming the flesh of those animals. But it has a smell, for sure. And the smell is really bad, is what they tell you. Most people can still remember the smell from the 70s and before that. So it's so distinct. So it smells kind of like, not quite like decay from what I hear, but it's got that decay kind of smell from a living animal. So that's a sign. Desire to not be around folks, like around others. They want to hide. That is another key characteristics, maybe some lethargic, being a little lethargic, or just kind of not eating, unthriftiness, things like that. But again, wanting to isolate themselves is another thing. But basically, you have to look for a wound, because if they do show up and it's early on, that wound may not have all these distinct features. They may not quite yet be doing that off isolated pattern, because if it's a new infestation, so you want to check for every wound to see if there's larvae in there. It's a very hands-on approach. They do say that the horses and the dogs can smell it. So if you have working animals, they can eventually help you. But again, we're so many years past that we don't have that still in them. Not saying there isn't talk that we're going to bring dogs back into this situation, but I think it's definitely a good thing to do.
Yeah, so just all around, I've seen some presentations with, yeah, it's nasty stuff, which obviously that is one of those where obviously having the large sore is a very good indicator, but definitely I think the biggest thing is just knowing your animals and what is and is not normal. Like you have a cow that normally, like the minute that you pull into your property, they're like on you. They're like, where are my cubes? Where is my food? And then all of a sudden they don't show up and you're like, okay, what's going on? So
Yeah.
definitely knowing what is and is not normal for your livestock, for your pets, is going to be definitely a key to catching this early. Because if it is caught early enough, the animals can be treated.
Right.
But if it waits too long, it is fatal.
Yes, an untreated situation is fatal 7 to 14 days. Always. There's no way for them to survive an infestation if it's not managed. And one main reason is the presence of the first larva brings in more flies to come lay their eggs. So you'll start with a small wound that will eventually become exasperated, so to speak, and it can vary. So I've seen the big, huge wounds that happen, but I've also seen small little like pocket hole wounds. So it could be just one area, of course, concern is the umbilical area for a newborn. It could just be that, and it will literally stay right in the umbilical because they'll just feed down through it. So it'll be hidden. You won't really see the larva, but they're down inside, and that can happen in any type of wound. So big, of course, is obvious. It's
Yeah.
the not obvious that are the problematic. But yeah, any animal that's just acting funny. So one of the things that they did back in the day that we may not do anymore, some folks do. I'm not saying that people aren't, but it's a constant visual to your animals, going and visiting them every couple days at least. Getting them used to being handled is really a key that folks need to start thinking about if it comes back, because that's what I hear. A lot of folks are like, yeah, I don't have the time. I don't normally visit them on a regular basis. And I've been around herds that are terrified of people because they don't get any interaction. And that will be very problematic. Those are the kind of herds that we won't have the ability to manage easily. And management is possible and necessary. Any larvae that are identified should be reported. It is mandatory that they are to Texas Animal Health Commission. We are seeing other blowflies that are laying eggs in animals. So finding them doesn't mean you have screwworms, but you do have some. So we still want those. We want to have that verified that they aren't this species, because other blowflies will do that from time to time, but their larvae will only feed on the necrotic tissue. But it's still, you don't want to leave them on the animal, because that means the animal's got a wound that needs to be cleared up and tended to. But the New World screwworm will basically eat that animal completely and what really happens, and I feel like when I say eat it completely, we're seeing this AI approach of the animal being completely consumed. It's not really what it is. It's usually wherever that wound is, it's in a vital location. It's either in the belly, which is going to go straight to the organs, or it's in the head, and then it's going to go straight to the brain or the spinal, an area of concern, and then a secondary infection. If it's not the actual feeding, it'll be an infection that'll kill that animal.
And I think one of the things, and Carla, I don't know about you, this caught me off guard, the fact that like literally it doesn't even have to be like a large like gash type wound. It's like it is a tick bite, like the size of a tick bite. That's all they need in order to
Yeah.
lay their lovely little babies.
Yes, and I hear a lot of the problems they had back in the day were the tick bites from Gulf Coast ticks. So if you live in a Gulf coastal region, which they do range higher than that, but they're obviously much higher on the Gulf Coast or area of Texas and any other state in the Gulf Coast region, those large ticks feed on the ears of the animals, so they become sites because they like to mass feed, so they make these larger wounds. But yeah, a tick bite can be an entry point. Any little scratch, using ear tags can be an issue, because that also is putting an entry wound they could get into. I've also heard that cattle grub holes, that was the new one I learned this year, and I was like, I hadn't thought about that because we don't see cattle grubs often anymore, but they're still out there for folks who aren't using the parasiticides for them. But once that larva, the cattle grub larva leaves, it leaves a big wound, and until it heals, if you had screwworms around, they could come and lay their eggs on it, and then now they're going to eat out, and that's much worse, obviously, than the cattle grub that left it in the first place. So yeah, it can be very small, could be very big, and that's why wildlife are so attracted to them, because of the rutting, where they like to pound, hit into each other. I'm not a wildlife expert, so I don't want to act like I am one, but I hear they hit each other because that's just what the males do, and yeah.
They do get pretty nasty with each other sometimes. But so you had mentioned, so if somebody suspects, so first off, there has not been, as of today, other than that random human case, there has been no confirmed reports of screwworm larvae fly here in the US, correct?
Correct. And as of this time, yes.
Okay.
For this situation, not saying we haven't had a historical situation,
Right.
But yes, for this outbreak, yeah.
For this outbreak. So what happens if somebody suspects that they might have found a screwworm fly, or have an animal that has um the larvae in a wound? What you mentioned contacting the Texas Animal Health Commission, but what is the procedure that they should follow?
Yeah, that's number one. They definitely want to contain that animal, is what I've kind of been suggesting. If nothing else, at least having it in a pasture close by, or so they can't run off if because we have people have many acres, right? And we don't want to have to hunt that animal back down. The worst is if that animal was to succumb to those wounds and then they passed in the field. That would be awful. So we want to keep them close by, and call your local veterinarian as soon as possible, as well as Texas Animal Health Commission. They both need to be there, because your vet needs to be there to help you tend to the wound. Animal Health Commission needs to be there to take the larva off your hands. If you would like to advance that situation, you can start collecting the larva from the animal. That is recommended as well. That doesn't mean you collect a few and then let it back go, though. You need to still keep it until it's treated, but you could start collecting larvae out of it, get all the larvae you can find. The more, the better. There's nobody's going to say, oh, you gave me too many.
You sent me too many. I'm so sorry.
As an entomologist, no, we want them all. But you really have to remove all of them anyways. They're either going to have to be killed at some point or extracted by your hand. So take them out as many as you can. And if those two, and those are two things you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know who to call. You can always call your county extension agent. They're there to help guide you back to those folks, because it is going to be those ones in charge. And if it's wildlife, Texas Parks and Wildlife needs to be called, as well as Texas Animal Health Commission. I would probably call them both, because they're all going to be involved in that situation. But there are only certain places those larvae can be sent. So they do need to be collected and then sent off to those folks. If anybody has flies, though, we're usually willing. I'm open to look at your fly picks for you. We don't anticipate you would find the fly before you find the larva. It's just not really going to work that way. So, but I'm still happy to look at your flies.
So if somebody does collect some of those larvae, what is the best, how do they need to be preserved, I guess would be the best terminology to use?
Yeah. Alcohol, 70% or higher. So, yeah. And only alcohol. So,
Okay.
no.
And just
Or-
in like a little plastic
yeah,
tube,
yeah.
whatever.
Hand
Some
sanitizer could be done too if you had to. That would be my
like,
only alternative. I've,
in
nothing
a
else.
pinch.
Yeah, in a
In a,
pinch. Any container that you can get a hold of is works. We get bugs sent in anything. So as long as it's not going to lose the liquid, is
I
basically.
was gonna say, what is the most creative thing that you've ever had a sample come in? I realize this is off topic, but I have to know that you can
What
think of.
mine have not been too crazy, but people will put them in anything they can find. Baby jars, old food
Oh,
jars.
actually
Any
a good
kind of, and
idea.
those work great. Yeah. So I mean, what else? You're just throwing it away anyways. But bottles, pill bottles. So
I was gonna say a film canister would work, but I don't think they make film canisters
yeah, it's been a
anymore.
long time since I've had those come in. Yeah.
Um, so I'm trying to think. Carly, am I missing anything? I'm sure I'm missing a ton of stuff, Carly.
Um, I don't know. Is there anything else you want to add that maybe we missed? Because I know you've talked about it,
You,
1,000 times in the last couple months. So
I would say for wildlife, especially for folks in y'all's region, I'm sure other people are watching this, not just in the hill country, but the hill country is a hot spot for wildlife. Anything you see that looks out of place, report it. Again, those individuals would rather you misreport something or just be overly cautiously reporting than not. And don't assume someone else is reporting it because they're not doing it. I can promise you. So we do want everything reported. That's the first important stage and must be done. But wildlife is going to be the harder situation because obviously they're not our animals and we're just
right.
out there enjoying what they're providing for us. But if you see an animal that may have a wound on its head that looks suspicious or it smells funny or it's hanging around, because those were things they saw in Florida that they did not realize was something they should have been reporting. But the deer were trying to tell them and they weren't listening. So we want to be listening. And all exotics, I've had that question too.
Oh,
It's not just deer. We talk deer because that's our natives, right?
right.
But we are in an area of the country where they bring in exotics from all over the place. And from what I hear, they all have a tendency to hit each other.
Yes. I will say, I think somebody said that unfortunately the one animal that doesn't seem to be too terribly affected by it are feral hogs. They seem to not
Oh,
have a resistance, but they don't maybe have the impact that we would maybe hope
yeah.
feral
But
hogs.
we can't use this as a way to get rid of the feral hogs,
Mhm.
unfortunately, even if it
No.
did work. But yeah, during any wildlife, I've been asked about audads and all these other, yep, all of them. They're all susceptible because they're still a warm-blooded animal. Now, again, they have times, and if it's not rutting season, it's the birthing season, right? So that's the other calving season is also when we have a high attack on both the mom and the baby. Now they go baby first, but moms for a while after, after having that event, they're going to have some concerns as well, and they are targeted as well. So that's definitely reasons why we don't want it back.
No.
And I know it would be terrible to be the first person to call, but it's worse to be the first person who didn't call. And then
Yeah.
now all your neighbors have it too, because you're still going to be involved in the situation. And
Yeah.
if they realize it was you, which they'll know eventually, it's going to look really bad. I mean, but don't bring animals here that shouldn't be coming. That's number one key. This fly is not going to fly here by itself. It's only going to get here by animal movement or humans. But like I said, most of those human issues will definitely be tended to before they get out of control. It's the animal movement that's the bigger concern.
Yes, because we we can move them hundreds of miles within a day or two versus the fly itself. They only fly, trying to think of back all the trains. They don't fly, they cannot fly that far
Six
in
to
a
12
day.
miles. Yeah, six
Oh,
to
yeah.
12 miles is about what they travel. And they're not going to travel if they don't need to travel. So that's the other
Right.
thing about an insect. If I've got all the food I need right here, all my resources to lay my eggs, then I'm not going to travel because why waste the time and the
Yeah.
energy?
They're no different than us. I always tell people, I'm like, would you want to travel like 2 miles to go to the grocery store if you could just like hop like a couple of feet over to the grocery store? No, animals are the same way. We're all lazy at the end of the day. Let's be
Yes.
honest.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to spend the gas, right? So that's exactly
Yeah,
they don't want to spend the gas to go that far.
exactly. So I guess you had mentioned the sterile fly technique
Mhm.
I think at the beginning. So I guess so that is sort of the quote unquote, I'm not gonna say only method, but that is kind of the accepted method of eradication for these guys.
Yes, it's a necessary piece to have eradication. So management is capable with other means. And of course, other countries that have it have developed sustainable management tools that help them get through. If they had gotten rid of the fly, they would be producing at a higher level, right? So there's a lot of talk. It's like, well, we know those countries can make it. Why can't we? Well, we can. It's just our production would be impacted still. We would still have production losses all the way around, and it would impact the economy. But the sterile flies are necessary to achieve eradication, and that's why they were developed. And just kind of break that down a little more. I know we talked a little bit on it, but what it is they mass rear these flies in the laboratory, which is currently only in Panama at this time. We are in the works of repurposing of an old fruit fly lab in Mexico, and then we just got the announcement that they're putting funding to build a new lab in Texas to build us our own production facility, which will take a couple years though. So this is not something that's like, boom, we close our eyes and it's here. It's not an easy to build one of these. They have standards that are beyond measures, because if a single female were to get out, then you got a whole problem in front of you. So a lot of things involved in that, but they do rear them in the lab, and then they put the pupa through a radiation process with cobalt-19, and then that breaks the chromosomes up, that makes them sterile, so to speak, unable to produce offspring is what it is. So then we release them, but this process only makes it so that they don't have the ability to grow future generations, but they're still able to be a fly, because that's very important. They still have to go out in the wild and entice those wild females that, hey, I'm a great mate, let's meet up. Because if they don't mate with the wild females, they don't achieve the job we asked of them. So then they drop them out of planes, and then they put them on the ground in pupal releases. And then those wild males will go out and look for those females. And as I said, they mate, and then she only mates once in her life. That's a technique that's unique to these flies. And with that single mating, she has all that sperm that's useless, but she doesn't know it. So
Yep.
then she lays the eggs, and they're useless eggs. So it internally crashes the population in the process of doing the surveillance on the ground and also doing the treatment of the animals. Because even if you have it in your area, you're not going to just sit back and wait for the flies to fix your animal. Your animal will still die in that process. So you still have to do the treatments to the animals. Plus, you got to stop those future generations by controlling the larva stage as well. So, yeah.
So, okay, I have a question. I don't know if you know this. So you say they like drop them out of planes, and I've always wanted to ask this, and I keep forgetting. Do they like literally just like open the back of a plane and it's like be free? Or are they dropping these like crates? Like how do they like my brain
I pictured it.
my brain just goes to like
I
this
know.
crazy place.
So I feel like you saw my talk in Abilene last week. I am the same way. I want to go and see how these are coming out of the plane. So back in the day, because we may have people who may be like, I remember they dropped the boxes. They used to drop boxes that had pupa in it. They don't do that anymore. Now they deposit the pupa, like they drive up to the pupal stations and put them. But they do let out live flies out of a plane. And I don't know how it is, but I envision it almost like you do. Like they put on I've watched way too many cartoons as a kid, put on the little bomber hats and they go out to do their job, and they're being released, and, they're out to hunt. But I have no idea exactly, because I'm obviously not there, but there's obviously a technique in which they're able to basically release them out of the plane in the fly stage. So they come out ready to go, which I really don't.
I need a video. I need a video
Dude,
of
I haven't
this.
been able to find one. I'm like,
Because I also thought of that movie like Operation Dumbo Drop, where they drop an elephant out of like an airplane, except the fact that they can fly, so they're not going to give the flies parachutes to get out of the plane. I don't know. My brain
That's how
went.
I pictured them. Like you said, the little helmets with like a paratrooper, but it's a fly, so it flies anyway. But
I feel like I've seen that somewhere. I gotta find that old Disney. I think it's an old Disney cartoon. So I don't know. Maybe I should more. I really do. And I'm Charlie. Somebody's watching this and they're like, "You idiot! You should already know the answer."
It's one of those things.
Make this fun.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Carly, I mean, I think that pretty well covers the basics. Did I miss anything? Did you have any other questions?
No, I think that was a good overview. Just I personally haven't received a lot of calls here in Blanco County about the screwworms, but just kind of the little bit of chit chat about it over here. Just some questions that I have heard is kind of more what you covered. We get a lot of like the scientific kind of deep dive into it. So I think it was nice to kind of take a step back and look at the general overview. What is it? How is it getting here? How are we preventing it? And just yeah, it was a good overview of everything. So thank you.
You're welcome. And I
And,
think
and I
it's
and
people
I guess
realize our impact into this because it's not just like, unfortunately, it's in another country right now. We don't have to worry about it in a sense, but we do have to worry about it because we have to do our part and we have to watch others and make sure they do their part. And some people think, of course, if you get Facebook, people think, oh, they made up this fly, it just showed up. That's not true. It really was here at one point, but its impact will be to everybody, not just Texans, not just Texas cattle owners. It will be everybody that will feel the presence of this fly if it returns. And we're really not set up to handle it either, right? We don't have the expertise of people who know how to doctor these kind of wounds and to deal with them. So I hoped I never ever would have to really deal with them. I learned them in a textbook and they should have stayed in that textbook, but they did not. So
and I guess kind of touching on that is as of, because I know there's been several, how do I word it? The not necessarily posts, but there have been talks of, you know, certain feeds, certain things out there that are supposed to be made to be a treatment or a preventative for this fly. But as of right now, there are no FDA approved products out there to prevent these, basically.
right. I mean, our prevention is, and that's the key on how you talk about it. And I think that's what people get confused. Prevention is what we're doing right now, being vigilant and keeping it out. That's prevention. Putting a product in your animal to fight a fly that's 400 or 500 miles away is in my eyes stupid, right? It's not going to do any good. You're just going to build resistance to the flies and other organisms we need to control today. So we don't jump to that stage until we need to jump to it. Now, FDA is going through the chains to prepare if we need an emergency situation. And even if it shows up, it will still be just under emergency situation. So just because, okay, someone down the road or 60 miles away got an issue and has to be given this product, doesn't mean you can now jump out there and start using that product. And I know that angers some people when you talk to them like that, but it's because those flies grow so fast. They literally go from egg to an adult within 20 days or less. So you've got a fast growth, and that's less than a housefly does, thankfully, but it's still pretty quick in that those generations can grow so quickly that you're building resistance with every single generation. But we can't prevent with a chemical. That's never been the way you control anything anyways. You have to wait till it's there. We have to prevent with control measures that are hands-on approaches, keeping them out, doing these things to prevent them from getting in the door, so to speak, before anything else. And yeah, there's been talk of using certain feed-throughs. There's no data to support the efficacy of any of that at this time. I'm not saying it can't work. I've never seen data, and what I have seen is not promising. So not in a feed-through option. Plus, again, we're just building resistance. And then when we need to kill something, we can't kill it. And we don't have any other options out there. So but there will be things, they're not going to leave us high and dry and be like, oh, sorry, there's nothing for you to do. There are things that will be utilized. It's just, this is a fly that's been gone literally almost 50 years. We eradicated it in 1976 officially from Texas. So that's just shy of 50 years. So there aren't things still on the market because that doesn't make any sense to keep it there for 50 years and never buy it. That's not good for the company. And then there was no other uses for those. But there are a few things still out there. But again, they're only good when you have the actual infestation. And we don't want to get to that point. We want to stay it the other way.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I mean, Carly, if you don't have anything else, I don't have anything else.
I'm good if you're good.
Okay, I'm good. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Swiger, for
You're welcome.
joining us I almost said this morning. It is this afternoon.
You know what time it is.
Technically speaking, it is this afternoon. If y'all have any questions, please reach out to your county extension agent. We do AgriLife does have a New World Screwworm fact sheet available. I think if you just like Google New World Screwworm fact sheet, or NWS is like the shortened version that a lot of people use because it's it's a mouthful.
Yeah.
So
I
NWS
actually
is
have it
actually
pulled up, so I'll put it in the comments.
perfect.
We web page for our couple fact sheets and other information. So.
Perfect. And yeah, we at AgriLife, we're always trying to stay, I'll say stay ahead, or at least stay with the curve
Yeah.
of everything. So if anything changes, we will do our very best to update you. But like Dr. Swiger said, hopefully this never comes to fruition and it is all just a bad dream.
That's my optimism.
Exactly. Exactly. All
Yeah.
right, everybody. Well,
Thank you.
yes, thank you, everybody. Hope y'all have an absolutely fantastic Tuesday. And we will see y'all next week. Bye.